When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Circle of Light. User, BlueERT. Posted, September 26, 1996.
Growing up, there weren't many hard and fast rules in our home. In the wintertime, there was only one we really had to worry about. Never play between the houses. The reason for this had everything to do with living in the snow belt, where all homes were built with a steeply angled tin roof. Those roofs were built in such a way that when enough wet snow accumulated on them, it would slide right off, landing next to the house with a heavy whoomp. Our neighbors on the left side, the Melancons, had a double lot, their house built on the corner furthest away from us. It left so much room that when the snow slid off that direction, you heard it but couldn't feel it. On the other hand, our neighbors on the right of us, the Parks, were so close that there was barely room for those miniature avalanches. When they fell, it created a sort of wind tunnel effect, compressing the impact until it was strong enough the wall in our living room would jump 2 or 3 inches inward. Those ones sounded like a bomb going off. Anyone awake when it happened was guaranteed to jump. Given we're talking hundreds of pounds of compressed water, snow, and ice coming down like a rocket, you can understand why Mom and Dad didn't want us playing in there. The danger of being crushed wasn't enough. There were the icicles. They hung down on either side of the house like glistening crystal stalactites, sometimes growing up to a foot in length. My brother Mark and I loved throwing snowballs at them, seeing how many we could dislodge at a time, shattering them like glass. The true joy of the game was when you finally nailed a fat one. Watching as it fell, sunlight refracting through it into a rainbow of color before it savagely punched deep into the snowbank beneath it. Across the street from us was a rail yard where plows piled snow into heaps the size of small houses. When we wanted to play King of the Castle or dig snow tunnels, that's where we did it. The idea being it was safer than our own yard. Mark and I would be over there all day, letting our imaginations run wild. Cops and robbers, Arctic explorers, astronauts on the ice planet. We invented so many games I can't even remember them all. The only thing that ever interrupted us was passing freight trains, some of them up to a mile long. The ground would rumble as they went by, their wheels grinding so loudly you had to cover your ears. The way I remember it, those snow hills could be up to 100 feet long and a dozen feet deep in places. To someone our size, they felt like mini cityscapes where we carved out our topographies, assigning a name to each little section. 2nd Street, Main Street, and so on. Then there were the sewers, 2-foot-wide horizontal tunnels between sections painstakingly carved out by Mark with Mom's little garden trowel. He always had this innate sense of where he could dig and how much weight the passageway could bear before collapsing. Crawling through one of Mark's projects, the rough-hewn walls dragging at your snowsuit was exhilarating, like you were truly exploring an underground world. Once you stuck your head through the opening, all you could do was inch toward the circle of light at the other end. The more Mark dug, the more confident he got, and the further away that circle of light became. His masterpiece was going to be the Eisenhower Tunnel, named after the real one in Colorado. We'd driven through it with our parents the previous summer. Mark was beside himself with joy. The rest of the way home, he couldn't stop talking about how one day he would build a tunnel just like that. I really think he might have, given the chance. My brother's version of the Eisenhower Tunnel took him almost a week to finish, only a few days ahead of our return to school after Christmas break. I've wondered if having that deadline compromised the whole thing, forcing him to work faster than he should have on something of that scale. Maybe the real answer is a kid shouldn't be tunneling underneath hundreds of pounds of snow without supervision, no matter how good they are. When it was done, Mark was ecstatic, doing victory laps from one end to the other. He was so proud of himself. I was proud of him too. I loved my brother very much. He was halfway through one of those victory laps when I felt the rumble of a passing freight. Mark must have felt it too, because it looked like he froze, not sure whether to go forward or back. As in love with his work as he was, he knew that this was the wrong place to be when the ground was moving. Before he could make a decision, the tunnel pancaked down around him, killing him instantly. Or at least, that's what I like to tell myself. The alternative is that my little brother slowly suffocated while I made a feeble attempt to dig him out. When we finally got to him, it was too late. The circle of light was long gone, taking Mark with it.
Subject: The Red Hand of Valparaiso. User: 12DOA. Posted January 7th, 1999.
Every university has its urban legends, and Valparaiso is no different. Most times, these stories are trotted out to keep people safe. For example, a ghost is invented to keep students from wandering campus at night in case they decide to head into town where they might get roughed up by locals. Alternately, there might be a legend about a freshman girl throwing herself off one of the nearby towers because some horny senior had seduced her into unprotected sex and given her a disease or knocked her up or both. Given that Valpo University is owned by the Lutherans, you'd figure that would be the kind of legend that encourage. But no, here everyone is afraid of the Red Hand. The story goes that when classes resume in January, following Christmas break, the first art student to go into Cronky Hall Theater is cursed. Sometime within the next 6 to 12 hours, that student will see a red handprint somewhere, the Red Hand of Valparaiso, and will be dead by the next sunrise. Given that Valparaiso itself used to be a sundown town, I'm not sure what it says about the Ivy Leagues that the university here used to be called the poor man's Harvard. All I know is that when I heard about the hand, I figured it had some kind of symbolic connection to the town's bloody history, a safe bet considering we were only 20-some years removed from its last race-related murder. Even the mechanics of the whole thing fail to make any sense to me. What if no one entered the theater? What if two people entered at the same time? What if the so-say cursed person was blind? Would they die without any warning, or would they hear some narrator's voice saying "red hand" like one of those descriptive video services? Ludicrous. Turns out being a smartass can't save you. I heard the story during my first year. My flight back to school from home had been delayed by a day due to an ice storm, so I arrived on campus after classes had already begun. Everyone was all abuzz about the curse because that morning an ambulance had taken someone away from freshman dorms. No one seemed to know who it was or whether the stretcher had been completely covered by a sheet or only partially. Valpo students aren't known for being smart about liquor consumption. What student is, so I assumed one of them had tied one on too hard and had to have their stomach pumped. I didn't hear any more about it, and life went on. I'm in my second year now, and last night my post-Christmas flight touched down almost a full 12 hours late. When I finally climbed into bed, it was well past midnight, and I was far too tired to notice my bedside clock blinking. Oversleeping, plus panic about being late, led me to forego breakfast this morning and make a run for school. I was in such a hurry that I didn't pay any attention to the groups of people, students and teachers, hanging outside the Cronky as I rushed past them. When I blasted through the big double doors into a completely empty hallway, it finally hit me. I must have been first in. I flashed back to first year and the ambulance, but only briefly. Like I said, I didn't put much stock into that kind of thing. I was just grateful this silly superstition meant I wasn't technically late. After class, I hustled off campus to my night job as a dishwasher where dinner rush was just about to start. I said hi to everyone in the back, nodded at the two waitresses up front who ignored me, and dropped a Slayer cassette in the dish pit boombox. It was so busy, I didn't think about anything other than loading that dishwasher until near closing time. It had to be after 9 p.m. when I finally stepped back from the sink. The late night and relatively early start, plus a full day of classes and work, were starting to catch up to me. My feet ached. I stretched my neck stiff from being bent over all night. There, above the dish pit, was a dull, brownish red handprint, as if someone had dipped their hands in the crud at the bottom of the sink and smeared it on the wall. I chuckled to myself. The boys must have heard I'd been first in this year and decided to have some fun with me. I stripped off my rubber gloves and turned down the boombox. Very funny, guys. You're gonna be screwed when I die and there's no one to pick up these shifts. I snorted and turned Slayer back up. A minute later, Danny, one of the prep cooks, poked his head around the corner. "Did you say something, Brian?" I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, the whole brown hand gag. Very funny." When I went to gesture toward the handprint, I saw it was no longer there. "Okay, I gotta give you credit. That was fast." Danny cocked his head. "What was fast? Have you been smoking Daryl's weed? I told you not to do that shit, man. You never know what he's mixing in with it." "Come on, Dan, stop screwing around. The handprint on the wall. Who told you I was first in?" His eyes widened. He turned his head toward the rest of the kitchen. "Oh shit, you were first? Hey Mike, Connie, Brian was first in. He saw the hand." Looking back at me, he offered a sympathetic expression. "Dude, you're gonna die. That sucks." I searched his face, waiting for him to crack a smile. Nothing. Just that same look you offer someone when you heard their dog was hit by a car. A sound of scuffling feet, then Mike, the line cook, a heavy-set, middle-aged guy with poorly drawn blue maritime tattoos up and down his arm, also came around the corner. Instead of the mortician's sympathy I was getting from Danny, Mike's expression was excited. "You actually saw it? The hand?" I pointed vaguely in the direction of the wall above the sink. It was there, but why am I telling you? You guys put it there, then wiped it off while I wasn't looking. Holy shit, Mike said. "It's real. Connie, the hand is real. I knew it." He started bounding off before catching himself and giving me a brisk nod. "Sorry, bro. We're gonna miss you." Then he was gone, and I could hear him telling Connie the story through the pass bar. This was getting out of hand. Their total commitment to the bit had me sweating a little. "Danny, come on, man. You guys got me. Great joke. Now, can we move on?" He walked right up to me and threw his long, skinny arms around my body. I stiffened up. He held me for at least 10 seconds too long, then stepped back, giving me a sad smile. "We don't joke about the hand here, dude. We'll talk shit about your mom all day long, but some things are off limits. Brian, you gotta get ready." My heart started to race. He really wasn't kidding. I suddenly started breaking down the likelihood that one of the stoners I worked with, who had never cooked a steak to order in their lives, could have snuck up on me, made a filthy handprint, and cleaned it up all in a matter of seconds without me noticing. Danny gave me one more sympathetic shoulder squeeze before shouting corner and walking out of the dish pit. I stood there staring at the empty steel sink, a knot of dread beginning to tighten in my stomach. By the end of my shift, that knot had been joined by several others until it felt like my guts were trying to strangle each other. After the revelation, everyone in the kitchen had treated me like a sick relative except for Connie, who continued pretending like I wasn't even there. Walking home, a cold wind cut through my layered coats like they didn't exist either, and I became transfixed by the thought of being a dead man in dead clothes. Rationally, I knew that was incredibly stupid. If I hadn't been pranked, then the whole thing had to have been my imagination, and yet I couldn't let it go. Couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone behind me every step of the way back to my place and up every step to my room. It's still here in the room with me now, that feeling. Even with my curtains thrown open and moonlight flooding in, I can't escape the sensation that there's something just out of sight, hiding in spots where the shadows are just a little darker than they should be. 3 a.m, and I'm struggling to stay awake. This is probably ridiculous, and in the morning I'm sure I'll have a good laugh rereading what I've written here. I'm just so tired, and the bed looks so soft. Maybe if I just rest my eyes for a second, I won't sleep. I won't.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.